A man becomes a slave when he surrenders his mind to the crowd. Marcus Aurelius. Before we begin, here's a small ritual. Write in the comments one word that accurately describes your current state. Sign it and let's get started. Power always whispers. It does not scream, does not strike at once. It comes softly, like a fog at dawn, creeping through the cracks of the soul. Marcus Aurelius knew this too well. For him, power was never a trophy, but a trial of spirit. To hold power and not lose oneself was the hardest battle. Imagine power as a serpent with many heads, each whispering a promise. One offers safety, another, adoration, the next, control. The man in power does not fight others first. He fights himself. The serpent hisses sweet lies. You are chosen, you are above, you are irreplaceable. This is where the fall begins. Marcus sat on the throne not as a master, but as a servant of something higher. He watched the waves of Rome, its madness, its hunger for spectacle and conquest. Around him, men fell to the serpent every day. Generals drunk on victory, senators drowning in schemes, crowds roaring for blood in the arenas. Marcus remained still, like a rock in the river. He saw how power feeds on fear. Give the people an enemy, and they will kneel. Give them bread, and they will forget their chains. Show them a leader who claims to love them, and they will follow into the abyss. Power does not need truth. It only needs a story. And people love stories more than they love freedom. But there is another side, the shadow within. Every man carries a hunger for control, over his fate, over others, over life itself. This is the place where rulers are born, and this is the place where they are destroyed. The man who cannot face his own shadow will project it onto the world. He will see enemies everywhere, traitors in every corner, threats behind every face. His rule becomes a mirror of his inner chaos. Marcus understood this dance. He saw his own anger rise, felt the poison of arrogance touch his mind, but he learned to watch it, to let it pass like a storm. He wrote to himself, not to the world. His meditations were letters to his own heart, reminders that the only true empire is the one within. Power's true seduction is not wealth, not fame, not even victory. It is the illusion of separation, that the ruler stands apart from the ruled, that he is made of different flesh, different spirit. This lie shatters kingdoms. It splits the soul in two. In the quiet of his chambers, Marcus repeated to himself, "You are a man, you will die, you will lose everything. And in that loss, you will find yourself." The first crack in the armor of control is the recognition of impermanence. What breaks people is not the weight of life, but the belief that they can hold it forever. Power promises eternity, but it delivers ashes. And yet, the pull remains. Across centuries, across empires, the same pattern dances on the stage. A young leader, burning with ideals. A seasoned king, clinging to his throne. A fading empire, desperate for meaning. Over and over, the serpent whispers. Over and over, men bow. The most dangerous power is the one that hides itself as virtue. Control dressed as care, domination masked as protection. Marcus knew this mask well. He saw it in himself, and that is why he remained free, even in chains of gold. The lesson is sharp. The man who rules himself cannot be ruled, and the man who flees his shadow will kneel before another. By the end of each day, Marcus returned not to the Senate, not to the army, not to the empire, but to his own heart. There, in the silence, he measured his victories, not by conquered lands, but by conquered fears. This is where the story begins. In the silent war within, the true battlefield is never the city, never the throne, never the crowd. It is the quiet room where a man meets himself. The shadow of power is not cast by the crown or the sword, but by the mind that wears them. Marcus Aurelius watched as Rome devoured itself from within. He saw that the more power grew, the more fragile it became. Like a giant with feet of clay, it towered over men. yet trembled with every whisper of rebellion. Power feeds on attention. It survives through spectacle, through symbols, through stories that bind the many to the will of the few. And at the heart of this machinery is the art of shaping minds, not through force, but through seduction. The most dangerous chains are invisible. Marcus knew that if you can make people believe, you no longer need to force them. You do not break bones, you break meaning. You replace their dreams with your dreams, their fears with your fears, and they will police themselves, chaining their own hearts to the order you create. The people do not need to be crushed. They need to be guided into a maze where every path leads back to the throne. Bread and games, war and peace, loyalty and fear. These are the walls of the maze. Power becomes the architect, and the people, its willing prisoners. Marcus watched the Senate erupt in theater. Words sharpened into weapons, promises thrown like dice. Behind the velvet words, the game was always the same: control. Who rises, who falls, who holds the keys to the next season of chaos. The people watched, cheered, cursed, and begged for more. To hold power without being consumed by it, Marcus believed, was to walk through fire without burning. It meant seeing through the masks, both one's own and those of others. It meant facing the truth that you are both ruler and prisoner, master and servant, hero and shadow. He saw how easily people trade freedom for comfort, how quickly they bow before the one who promises safety. The wolf at the gate is frightening, but the shepherd within the walls can be far worse. When people no longer remember how to stand alone, they kneel without being asked. Power becomes the storyteller. It writes the myths, carves the statues, paints the portraits, sings the hymns. It tells you who you are, where you belong, what to fear, and whom to hate. And it does so not with cruelty, but with care. The soft touch, the gentle word, the fatherly embrace. These are the tools of the deepest control. Marcus knew the weight of symbols. The purple robe, the laurel crown, the golden scepter. They were not ornaments. They were cages. They bound him to a role, a script, a destiny that was both grand and crushing. To step outside that script was to risk chaos. To stay within it was to risk the death of the soul. The shadow of power stretches not only over the ruled, but over the ruler. The man on the throne becomes a prisoner of his own image. He must always be strong, always be wise, always be just. But beneath the mask, he is still a man, afraid, flawed, mortal. And so Marcus turned inward. In the noise of Rome, he sought silence. In the hunger for conquest, he sought restraint. In the thirst for glory, he sought humility. He did not deny the shadow. He watched it, learned from it, made peace with it. The shadow whispers to every man. It says, "Take more, hold tighter, trust no one." It feeds on wounds, on old pain, on secret fears, and when it grows, it blinds. You see threats where there are none, enemies where there are friends, chaos where there is only change. To break free, Marcus believed, one must step into the shadow, not away from it. To see one's own hunger for control, one's own addiction to praise, one's own terror of loss. Only then can the chain be broken. He understood that the crowd is not the enemy, nor is the Senate, nor are the barbarians at the gate. The true enemy is within, the part of the self that craves to be above, beyond, untouchable. The people carry their own shadows. They follow leaders not because they are deceived, but because they long to place their burdens on another's shoulders. The surrender is mutual. The ruler and the ruled create each other, mirror each other, bind each other in a dance that repeats through the centuries. Marcus saw that to rule wisely was to remind people of their own strength, not to command them into obedience, but to awaken them into responsibility. This was the burden he carried, to stand before the serpent and not bow, to face the mirror and not flinch. At night, in the quiet of his chambers, he wrote to himself, "Remember, you are only a man. You will bleed. You will fall. You will lose all you have been given. And in the end, you will return to the earth, as all men do." This is the heart of power's shadow, the lie of permanence. The belief that one can rise above fate, above death, above time. But all thrones crumble, all empires fade, and all that remains is the mark left on the souls of men. Marcus understood the greatest legacy is not in monuments or victories, but in the quiet shaping of hearts. To awaken one man to his own shadow is to shake an empire. To teach one man to rule himself is to free a people. Power sharpens itself not through open violence, but through quiet erosion. Marcus Aurelius saw that the breaking of a mind rarely comes with a clash of swords or the roar of crowds. It happens in whispers, in the slow drip of fear, in the reshaping of meaning. Fear is the oldest tool, not the fear of death alone, but the fear of being alone, of being cast out, of losing place and face. Power understands this. It isolates first, then offers belonging as a gift. It takes away, then returns only what makes people grateful. The crowd forgets it was whole before the chains arrived. Pain is another chisel. Not always the pain of flesh, but the pain of confusion. Power confuses because a confused mind is a dependent mind. When the lines between truth and lie blur, when yesterday's friend becomes today's traitor, when the rules change without warning, the mind bends. Marcus saw this in the courts, in the barracks, in the marketplace. Men lost not to wounds, but to the exhaustion of constant guessing. And then comes the sweetest poison, distraction. Bread and games, noise and spectacle, wealth and pleasure. Not all chains are heavy. Some are made of silk. Marcus saw the Roman people fed on triumphs, parades, feasts. The empire danced while the earth cracked beneath its feet. A distracted people does not rebel. It claps. It sings. It praises the hand that tightens the leash. Control through language is perhaps the most subtle art. Words shape reality. Call conquest peace. Call silence harmony. Call submission loyalty. And the heart learns to kneel before the lie. Marcus knew this. He chose his words with care, not to deceive, but to anchor himself in truth. When a ruler corrupts language, he corrupts thought itself. But even deeper lies the power of memory. To break a people, break their story, rewrite their past, erase their heroes, blacken their triumphs, brighten their defeats. When people forget who they were, they no longer know who they are. Marcus understood that Rome's greatest danger was not the barbarian without, but the amnesia within. The machinery of control hums quietly. Surveillance not only of streets but of souls. People watch each other, correct each other, punish each other. Authority plants the seed, and the people water it with their own hands. The ruler becomes a gardener of fear, and the harvest never fails. Marcus faced this truth every day. He saw friends whispering behind closed doors, soldiers testing loyalties, servants masking terror behind smiles. He knew that suspicion rots trust, and without trust, a people shrinks into itself. But to resist the spread of fear, one must carry stillness within. Power plays on the hunger for meaning. People want to belong, to matter, to serve something greater. When no true meaning is offered, false meanings rush in. The flag, the anthem, the chant, the enemy, all become sacred. Marcus watched as men bled for banners they did not understand, for causes they did not choose. But perhaps the deepest lever of control is hope. The promise of a better tomorrow keeps the prisoner docile today. Hope is stretched just out of reach, a light that dances ahead but never arrives. Marcus believed in hope, but not the kind sold by power. His hope was inward, a fire no chain could touch. The breaking of the mind is a slow art. It begins with small concessions, tiny surrenders. Say yes today, promise to resist tomorrow. Tomorrow never comes. One day the man wakes up, and the face in the mirror is a stranger. Marcus saw this in the Senate, in the army, in the streets. The man who kneels once will kneel again. But he also knew, the way back begins with seeing. Seeing the chain, feeling its weight, hearing its whisper. Only the one who sees the strings can stop dancing to the puppeteer's tune. This is why Marcus wrote again and again to himself, "Remember who you are. Remember what matters." To break free, the first step is to face the pain, not to flee it, not to numb it, but to walk into it. The pain of loss, the pain of loneliness, the pain of disillusionment. These are teachers, not enemies. Marcus learned that the soul grows not in comfort, but in struggle. Power fears the awakened man, not the angry man, not the rebellious man, but the one who no longer believes the myth, the one who sees the emperor's robe as cloth, the throne as wood, the scepter as metal, the one who knows that true authority begins within. In the quiet of night, Marcus felt the weight of two empires, the one outside and the one within. He ruled one, but served the other, and in that service, he found a freedom no crown could give. The world will always have its tyrants, its liars, its chains, but it also has its quiet rebels, those who carry freedom in their marrow, who walk through the world untouched, who refuse to drink the poison of illusion. Marcus left no grand declaration, no thunderous legacy. He left a whisper: hold your ground, know your shadow, walk through the fire, and do not lose yourself. This is how the mind remains unbroken, even when the world trembles. There comes a moment when the old ways crack, when the stories no longer soothe, when the mask slips, and a man faces himself in the raw light of truth. Marcus Aurelius understood that no one escapes this hour. Power may delay it, wealth may hide it, but the reckoning always arrives. Crisis is the chisel that shapes the soul. Loss, betrayal, sickness, aging. These are the storms that strip a man bare. Marcus faced war at the edges of the empire, plague in the streets of Rome, whispers of rebellion in the Senate. But the fiercest battles raged inside his own heart. He knew that every blow from the outside awakened a question inside. Who am I without what I cling to? The shadow stirs in these moments. It rises not as an enemy, but as a messenger. It says, here is your anger, here is your fear, here is your hunger for control. Look, do not run. Marcus did not run. He sat with his sorrow, his rage, his doubt. He let the shadow speak, and in listening, he found clarity. The shadow is often misunderstood. People fear it, deny it, project it onto others. But Marcus saw that the shadow is part of the whole. To banish it is to banish half of oneself. He understood that true strength comes not from perfection, but from integration. The man who owns his shadow cannot be blackmailed by it. Pain opens the door to transformation, not because suffering is noble, but because it strips away illusion. When the ground trembles, when the walls fall, when the old self dies, something fierce and true awakens. Marcus called this the inner citadel, the unshakable core that no grief can touch. The awakening of the shadow is not a grand moment. It is quiet, often invisible. It happens when a man chooses restraint over rage, humility over pride, presence over escape. It happens in the silence after loss, in the stillness after failure, in the breath taken before the next hard step. Marcus watched men crumble under pressure, not because they were weak, but because they were unprepared to meet themselves. They had built empires on sand, identities on applause, meaning on conquest. When the applause faded, when the conquest soured, they were left with a hollow echo. But those who turned inward, who faced the mirror without flinching, discovered something remarkable. The shadow, once embraced, became a source of energy. Anger became fuel for justice. Fear sharpened into vigilance. Grief deepened into compassion. The wound once accepted became a scar of wisdom. Marcus wrote, "You have power over your mind, not over external events. This is where freedom lives. The world will rage, will fall, will rise, will betray, will surprise. But within, there is a space untouched by it all. To awaken to this space is to awaken to true power." He saw that the empire's greatest danger was not rebellion or invasion, but inner collapse. When people forget their own capacity for courage, they become prey to every passing tyrant. When they bury their pain instead of learning from it, they become easy to manipulate. The awakening of the shadow is an antidote to this sleep. Marcus did not preach withdrawal from the world. He governed, judged, commanded, but he did so as a man aware of his own shadow. He knew the pull of pride, the sweetness of revenge, the temptation to dominate. And knowing this, he stepped carefully, spoke deliberately, ruled with a tenderness born of battle. The path of awakening is not clean. It is marked by stumbles, by doubt, by nights of silence where no answers come. But in this dark, the soul forges itself. The man who walks through his own storm emerges with eyes that see deeper, with hands that hold lighter, with a heart that no longer trembles before loss. Marcus saw that every crisis was an invitation, not to collapse but to rise, not to tighten the fist but to open it, not to control but to collaborate with the chaos of life. He learned that surrender is not defeat, but alignment. When the river floods, you do not dam it, you learn to swim. The awakening of the shadow leads to a paradox. The more a man embraces his darkness, the more light he finds. The less he fears his weakness, the more resilient he becomes. The less he clings to control, the freer he feels. Marcus lived this paradox. He was emperor and servant, warrior and philosopher, ruler and student of life. The world often mistakes awakening for rebellion, but the true rebel is not the one who breaks chains outside, but the one who dissolves chains within. Marcus knew that no regime can imprison the man who has made peace with himself. His freedom was not granted by the Senate, nor defended by the army. It was earned in the quiet crucible of his own heart. At the end of each day, Marcus returned to his journals. There, in the flickering candlelight, he recorded his struggles, his failures, his insights. Not for glory, not for history, but to stay awake, to remember, to root himself again in what mattered. He wrote, "Life is short. Honor it. People are fragile. Forgive them. Power is fleeting. Hold it lightly. Pain is a teacher. Listen. The shadow walks beside you. Do not turn away." This was his practice, his prayer, his rebellion against the noise of the world. And in this practice, Marcus Aurelius offers a map for all who seek not just to survive power, but to be transformed by it. Freedom is not found in open fields or wide skies. It is born in narrow places, in the clenched jaw before a harsh word, in the pause before a lie, in the quiet refusal to surrender one's soul for approval. Marcus Aurelius understood this with every fiber of his being. The world offers many forms of freedom, all glittering, all fleeting. Freedom to own, to conquer, to rise, to dominate. But these are freedoms of the outer world, bound to crumble. The inner freedom Marcus spoke of is not given, not granted by law or leader, but earned in the furnace of the self. He watched men who seemed free, wealthy, powerful, envied, yet trembled at every shift of fortune, every rumor of disgrace. He watched slaves who, though chained, held a peace no master could steal. This was the paradox. The chains outside matter less than the chains within. Marcus practiced his freedom by walking lightly through power. He ruled without clutching. He loved without possessing. He served without needing applause. In every choice he asked, "Does this feed my soul or merely my image?" And when the answer was the image, he let it go. The path to inner freedom begins with honesty. Brutal, unsparing honesty. Marcus faced his vanity, his anger, his fear. He did not excuse them, nor did he drown in shame. He saw them, named them, and chose again. Freedom grows in this space, the space between impulse and action, between emotion and expression. Discipline was his compass, not the cold discipline of punishment, but the warm discipline of alignment. He aligned his words with his values, his actions with his purpose, his leadership with his humanity. This is not the freedom of doing whatever one pleases. It is the freedom of doing what one must, without being enslaved by craving or fear. Marcus saw that much of human suffering comes from confusion about control. People fight to control what they cannot, others' opinions, outcomes, fate itself, and neglect what they can, their own judgments, their own responses, their own choices. When a man withdraws his energy from the uncontrollable and invests it in himself, a strange peace arises. He wrote, "Do not waste time arguing about what a good man is. Be one." This was his shield against the chaos of empire. In a world of endless demands, of hungry eyes and restless hands, he turned again and again to the quiet work of character. The path is lonely at times. To be free within is to stand apart, not in arrogance, but in clarity. The crowd rushes to the newest sensation, the loudest voice, the quickest comfort. The free man stands still. He listens to his own heartbeat. He chooses his own pace. He does not need to be against the world, but he is no longer ruled by it. Marcus understood that belonging is beautiful, but only when it does not cost the soul. He loved his people, his city, his family, but he did not dissolve into them. He knew where he ended, and they began. This boundary was not coldness, but care. Without it, love becomes possession, service becomes slavery, duty becomes a prison. Gratitude was another key. Marcus faced death daily, of soldiers, of friends, of his own body inching toward decline. Yet he met life with open hands. He thanked the dawn, the breath, the brief moment of sunlight. Gratitude anchored him in the present, loosening the grip of fear over the future. He saw that freedom does not mean absence of pain. It means absence of unnecessary suffering. The free man still weeps, still bleeds, still grieves, but he does not curse life for its storms. He learns to dance in the rain, to find meaning even in the ache. In the court, Marcus governed with this spirit. He listened more than he spoke. He judged with an eye toward growth, not punishment. He saw that a ruler's real task is not to mold others to his will, but to awaken them to their own strength. The freer he became within, the less he needed to control without. And when the weight pressed heavy, when the empire demanded more than a man could bear, Marcus returned to simplicity. He walked in gardens. He breathed the cold air. He gazed at the stars. These were his reminders. The world is vast, time is brief, and all power dissolves into dust. The path to inner freedom is not a straight line. It spirals, loops, doubles back. Marcus stumbled. He failed. He lost his temper, his patience, his way. But each fall was a doorway, each mistake a teacher. The difference was not in perfection, but in persistence. He kept returning to the work, to the practice of being free. At the heart of this path lies surrender, not surrender to oppression, but surrender to life itself. Marcus learned to yield where force only deepened resistance. He learned that softness can be stronger than steel, that openness can withstand more than armor. He learned that control is often an illusion, but presence is always a choice. The final freedom is the freedom to die well. Marcus did not fear death. He welcomed it as a part of the great dance. He knew that no empire, no achievement, no name outlives the turning of the stars. What remains is the quality of one's days, the depth of one's love, the lightness of one's step. As his own end approached, Marcus faced it with the same quiet grace he brought to his life. He left no demand for monuments, no hunger for praise. He left a trail of words, a handful of meditations, a whisper across the centuries. Be steady, be kind, be free. In the end, every journey bends back to its starting point. Every search outside circles home. Marcus Aurelius knew this, felt it in his bones, wrote it into his days. The return to self was not an escape, but a coming home. A home beneath the noise, beneath the crowns and titles, beneath even the skin. The world around him never stilled. Rome pulsed with ambition, conflict, love, greed, hope. Men fought for place, for wealth, for memory. But Marcus walked through this world like a man carrying a lantern inside his chest. His light came not from what he commanded, but from what he released. He saw that a man may rise high and yet sink within. He may win all prizes and lose himself. He may be worshipped and feel hollow. To return to oneself is to close the distance between outer life and inner truth. It is to no longer split into the many masks the world demands. In his last years, Marcus gave more time to silence. The empire roared on. Armies marched, laws shifted, storms gathered. But he sat often in gardens, in chambers, beneath stars. There he spoke with no one but his own heart. He knew that the final companion in this life is the self. To know it is to die unafraid. He reflected on the tides of power, how they rise and fall beyond human grasp. He watched men scramble for influence, for legacy, as if time could be grasped in fists. But he knew better. Time moves through us, not for us. To return to oneself is to stand still within this river, not as its master, but as its witness. He wrote, "The universe is change. Our life is what our thoughts make it." This was no escape into fantasy. It was the hard discipline of shaping the mind to meet life as it comes. Joy, loss, victory, failure, all passing weather. The one unchanging thing was the stance of the soul. In the return to self, Marcus found forgiveness. He saw his own failings, his tempers, his moments of pride. He did not flinch from them. He let them be teachers, not curses. This softened his gaze toward others. If he stumbled, so did they. If he carried burdens, so did they. The return was not into isolation, but into connection. Love flowed from this place. Not the hungry love that clings or demands, but the spacious love that lets be. Marcus held his son, his friends, his soldiers with open hands. He grieved when they left, but did not bind them in his grief. To love from the self is to love without chains. He understood that freedom, power, even wisdom are not goals, but states of being. They cannot be hunted or hoarded. They arise when one stands whole, when one remembers the simplicity of being alive. The return to self is the shedding of what was never truly ours, the titles, the judgments, the fears, until what remains is bare and real. Marcus faced the end with the same humility he brought to his days. He did not beg for more time. He did not curse the fading light. He met death as he met life, with a steady breath, with clear eyes, with a heart both fierce and calm. In his writings, one senses no hunger for immortality. He knew that his words, his works, even his empire would dissolve into the great forgetting, and yet he wrote, not for history, but for the moment, for the trembling hand reaching for truth in the dark. This is his true legacy, not the crown, but the candle. The return to self is the quietest revolution. It topples no thrones, burns no banners, shouts no slogans, yet it breaks the oldest tyranny, the tyranny of forgetting who we are. Marcus broke this chain in himself, and in doing so, offered the key to others. He taught that to be with oneself is not a punishment, but a privilege. In the stillness, we hear the pulse of life. In the silence, we meet the roots of being. To stand alone is not to be lonely, but to be whole. The world may pull, may demand, may seduce, but the man anchored in himself sways without falling. As the last days approached, Marcus left no grand farewell, no dramatic closing. His life was his message. His calm was his final gift. And in this, he reminds us all, the only empire worth building is the one within. The only power worth seeking is over oneself. The only freedom worth having is the freedom to face life and death with open arms. In the end, all the walls fall, all the noise fades, all the crowns are set down. What remains is the quiet presence of a man who has met himself fully. In this meeting, Marcus Aurelius became not just emperor of Rome, but emperor of the heart, not by conquest, but by surrender, not by command, but by presence, not by rule, but by return. And so, the story folds back upon itself. The serpent bites its tail, the circle closes, the man returns to himself, and in that return, he becomes free. At the end, Marcus Aurelius stood in stillness. No crown, no army, no applause, only the quiet breath of a man who had faced himself fully. He knew that all thrones crumble, all names fade, all power slips like sand through fingers. What remains is the soul, shaped by love, tempered by loss, freed by truth. To return to oneself is the greatest victory. It is the quiet revolution no empire can crush. Marcus left this as his true gift, a path inward, a whisper across time. Be steady, be kind, be free. We're sure you've discovered plenty of value, so subscribe now and stay connected.